Mr. President,
Senator from Wyoming.
I thank the chairman of the committee, and I thank him for his kind words, but I thank him for his leadership on this issue. We've had a great teamwork effort, both between the senators and between the staff. And this isn't something that just came together a couple of weeks ago. This is something that's been worked on for about a year and a half, and pretty constant meetings on Fridays of all of the interested groups and then stakeholders. And it takes a tremendous amount of work to put something like this together and have it be in a bipartisan way like this. And it's largely because it came to committee. And in committee, we took a look at all of the amendments that were suggested, and we got the people together that had very similar amendments, and they usually were able to work out something to satisfy everybody in that instance, and we came up with a bill. And as Senator Harkin mentioned, passed 96-1 here. And anytime that we get something to pass, it is kind of a landmark thing. But when you get something that bipartisan, it's even more landmark. Well, we've been trying to get this bill wrapped up before the Supreme Court decision came out on health care. And the reason we've been trying to do that is who knows what it's going to say or what kind of ideas people will come up with when that happens. From both sides of the aisle, you know, this is a group of 100 idea generators. And so we wanted this cleared up by that time. And we're on a path to get that done right now. And a path that will keep the people employed that are taking a look at new drugs and devices and generics and biosimilars, and continue to get those on the market so that people will have the latest innovations. And of course, one of the things that we included in the bill was some use of foreign clinical trials if they were approved by the FDA. And that should even speed up the process. Of course, when you go to conference, there are a lot of things that people want to have, you know, that they brought up as amendments, and that's very critical in the bill. And you get some of them and you don't get others. I know that Senator Alexander played a huge role in this, and he had 7 items in the bill, and we got 6 of them. Senator Burr had 12 items in the bill, and we got 11 of them. And I've got to mention, of course, that one that we did not get is a particularly important but particularly difficult issue that's going to take more time to get it worked out. But it's one that deals with drug distribution security, and that's something we cannot avoid. We have to do, but it's going to take longer to work that out and deserves some extra time and some more understanding on both sides of the aisle on that one, and in a number of different states. And it doesn't just involve the Senate. It doesn't just involve the drug companies. It also involves the whole chain that these things have to go through, including the local pharmacist, who we don't want to overload with work, and the people who have to transport these drugs, who we don't want to overload with work or make it extremely complicated when they cross different state lines to have to do different kinds of reporting. Senator Isaacson had 4 amendments in there, and we were able to get 3 of them. Senator Paul had 2, and we got 1. Senator Hatch had 6, and we got all of them. Senator McCain had 2, and we got 1. Senator Roberts had 2, and we got both of those. Senator Murkowski had 2, and we got both of those. Senator Kirk had 2, and we got 1 of those. Senator Grassley had 2, and we got 1 of those. And Senator Portman had 2, and we got both of those. And Senator Coburn had 2, and we got 1 of those. Senator Corker had 2, and we got both of those. So there are a lot of the things that we did on the Senate side that became possible on the House side, and of course there are a number of things that they did on the House side that we couldn't agree with on this side either. But we did reach agreement, and we reached it in pretty much record time, and we now have a bill that can go ahead and be passed and go to the President for signature and assure that the level of safety that we have in our drugs not only continues but improves, and that drugs can get on the market faster than they have before by streamlining the process, and also making sure that there are better foreign inspections so that the ingredients that grow into drugs don't cause problems. So this legislation reauthorizes the Food and Drug Administration's user fee programs, and it ensures that the Americans get better access to safe, innovative medicines and medical devices. It'll make significant changes that'll improve the FDA's review and approval of new drugs and devices. Unfortunately, FDA's current process for reviewing and approving medical devices too often creates delay and unpredictability. This in turn threatens patient access to the best possible treatments for their conditions. In some cases, this has forced American patients to travel overseas to obtain access to life-saving new devices that FDA has not approved in the United States. The bill goes a long ways towards solving these problems and makes the most significant changes to the law governing FDA's review of devices in decades. This bill will speed the approval of devices by reducing the red tape associated with the, quote, least burdensome, unquote, standard that FDA uses to approve such devices. The bill will also make it easier for FDA to approve devices for patients with rare diseases who might not otherwise be able to have their conditions treated most effectively. It will also enable FDA to expedite safety determinations, to resolve appeals, and to improve their post-approval surveillance activities to detect problems as they occur. It's not good enough just to get it to approved. We want them watched after they're approved, and this will do it. The bill also contains important reforms to foster drug innovation and patient access to new therapies. It modernizes the accelerated approval pathway for drugs to reflect advancements in science over the past 20 years. And it formalizes a new process to expedite the development and approval of breakthrough therapies. These changes are particularly important for patients with rare diseases where there are no therapies available, and it's not feasible or ethical to require large conventional clinical trials. Nobody wants to be the one that's a test case when there might be something that really would work for them, and there aren't the size of the populations to be able to do the conventional clinical trial anyway. The patient community strongly supports these improvements because these will save lives. The bill also contains important reforms that will help mitigate the problems associated with drug shortages. It'll require better coordination within FDA, as well as the other federal agencies like the DEA. It will also allow FDA to move faster to take actions to address shortages through expedited reviews and approvals. The bill follows what I call the 80% rule. When we focus on the 80% of the issues that we can reach agreement on, rather than focusing exclusively on the parts, the issues that we can never resolve, we can achieve amazing results. Over a year ago, staff began to work on identifying the 80%. A group of staff from Republican and Democratic offices on the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee began a series of standing meetings and proceeded to meet every week for several months. They met with stakeholders and discussed policy solutions that each member thought would solve the problem. After much discussion of the benefits, costs, and possible unintended consequences, members agreed on a list of policy concepts. If there was not a consensus on a particular policy, it wasn't included. This is the 80% rule in action. As this process has progressed, my staff also met with the Republican staff on the Help Committee for at least 2 hours every week to keep them informed and seek their input. I also personally met with the members of the committee before markup to ensure that I understood their priorities. This bill reflects the work of every member of the Health, Education, Labor, and Pensions Committee. All of them have at least one provision included in this legislation. Many members off the committee worked with us to find consensus measures that address their priorities as well. As I mentioned, not everyone got everything they wanted. We did, however, find the 80% of each solution that we could all agree would help solve the problem, and the bill passed the committee by a voice vote. This legislation could be a model for how the process can and should work, regardless of the political environment. We followed this model as we transitioned from the committee process to the Senate floor. We worked with members who filed amendments in committee to address some of the concerns in the manager's amendment. We also worked with members who filed amendments on the Senate floor. We did the same thing in our discussions with the House. You can see that the results are very positive. We preserved and improved policies to foster drug innovation and patient access and to promote accountability and transparency at the FDA. We also made significant improvements to the Senate's medical device reforms for startup and emerging growth companies, and with respect to the 510K process. Now, we'd like to thank Senator Harkin for his tireless effort on this bill. I know that he spent countless hours and attended dozens of meetings working with senators and stakeholders and advocates to address their concerns. This bill would not have had such broad bipartisan support without all of his work. Senator Harkin's staff has also worked tirelessly on this bipartisan bill. Their knowledge, their professionalism, their graciousness were instrumental in addressing all of the issues in this bill. They worked many late evenings, they worked through weekends, they worked through countless working group discussions to be able to get the bill where it is today. And specifically, I want to recognize Elizabeth Youngman, Bill McConaughey, Kathleen Laird, Kate Wise for all their work. I want to thank Pam Smith, Senator Harkin's staff director, for her leadership in getting this bill to the finish line. I especially want to recognize Janelle Krishnamurthy, whose organizational and diplomatic skills helped us resolve the most difficult challenges and made sure that the priorities of all the members of the committee are reflected in the bill. I'd also like to thank the staffs of the Legislative Council, the Congressional Budget Office, and the Food and Drug Administration for all of their technical assistance. Again, there were people in those groups that had to work through the weekends as we were finishing up. And finally, I'd like to thank my staff, Keith Flanagan, Melissa Pfaff, Grace Stuntz, Katie Spangler, Rob Walton, and my Health Policy Director, Chuck Clapton. And I'd be really remiss if I didn't thank my staff director, Frank Macchiarola, for his work on this bill, especially as this bill progressed from the Help Committee, the Senate floor, and discussions with the House. My staff's been working around the clock for many days and for weeks and for months, and I sincerely appreciate their dedication to getting this bill passed and for helping to work with the 80% rule. I urge my colleagues to support this bipartisan bill that makes important changes to the FDA, and I ask them to support this process that expedites getting the conference done. We will have a real and meaningful impact on millions of American patients. I thank the chair and yield the floor.